Hola, my friends. Welcome to A Life I Choose, the place to be, to design your life so you can thrive. For those of you who don't know me, hi, I'm Emma. I'm a psychotherapist, a lifestyle strategist, and I'm also the founder of the self-development agency, A Life I Choose. Today, I'm going to introduce you to a good friend of mine. Her name is Yasmin Degiorgio, and she is the entrepreneur behind Sanya, Grassy Hopper, and Theobroma. And in this episode, in this podcast episode today, we are going to speak about the challenges she's faced in developing her businesses, as well as the spiritual journey that led her to them and that has spurred her on. And we are also going to speak about topics like Ayahuasca, our relationships with money, and also our relationships with other people in business. I hope you enjoy listening to it as much as I enjoyed recording it. We met like 3 years ago, I think. 3 years ago. And you invited me to Sanya.
Yeah.
And you said, I think our values are very aligned. We should collaborate sometime. And we have collaborated in small ways.
Yeah.
But what really developed from that meeting was a friendship.
Yeah.
And one, you're one of my favorite people to be around.
Thank you.
And two, you're super inspirational. And that's why I wanted to invite you on the podcast, because I feel like people could learn, we could all learn a lot from you. From your journey with business, with spirituality. You've started 3 businesses, sold one.
Yes.
2 of them are still going.
Yeah.
They're still your babies, and they've grown, and all of your businesses I've fallen completely in love with and been a repeat customer. I was a customer to 2 of your businesses yesterday, and I'm going to be again next week and the week after. So I really just want to ask you about your journey. Like, how did you start? Grassy Hopper, Theobroma, Sanya, what led you to this path?
Yeah, back to the beginning. Thank you for the question. It's nice, I think, to start a conversation about business, about why we do the things we do. And for me, it was very much born from a desire to create something that I felt reflected how I felt about the world. When I was in university, I studied economics and I studied politics, international development. And I was quite disappointed by my experience, because I came to realize that actually a lot of the way business is done doesn't really keep in mind the wider benefit of society. So a lot of businesses would sort of profit for themselves, and they didn't really care if they damaged people or the environment along the way. And when I started realizing this, and not just realizing it, I think the thing that shocked me the most was that this is often very much covered up by governments, by the media, and so on. Mm-hmm. And I sort of started discovering the hidden history of a lot of damage that was created by business. And
yes.
That really made me feel like I don't want to have any part of this. I don't want anything to do with business.
I remember having a very similar experience when I was in my teens, sort of thinking money was bad, and like all of this was sort of. I'm not saying this was your experience, but I remember having sort of this notion that if you were involved in that area, then there was something sort of, you were greedy.
Yes, totally. And yes, I had the same thing. I thought money was bad because I felt like human beings, which it is true in many ways. It's not so much about the money, it's about the human beings, but very often people will sacrifice things that are very meaningful in order to get money. And we often act very selfishly. We're tempted by the god of money, right, to sacrifice others along the way. And that was something that it didn't really sit with me. At that time in my life, I was really shifting my perspective of what success meant. From success means you have a well-paid job, you have a family, you achieve things in your career, to more of a inner reflection of what success really means. So I was looking at people who had a lot of patience, people who were very compassionate, selfless, and I started looking at these people and thinking, well, that's success to me. And it's quite a shift, because it's something not really that common, right? I went through my whole education being brainwashed into like, you need to get good grades, and then you need to go get to university, and then you need to get a good degree, and then you're going to get a good job. So it was all about...
And get married and have children.
It was all about sort of these very out there metrics of what is success for you. And in that moment, I started researching people that I felt had stepped out of that.
Who are some of the people who you really resonated with?
I mean, to be honest, most of them are like spiritual people, right? Like Saint Francis of Assisi or Saint John of the Cross, Saint Teresa. These people who I felt were very devotional and very selfless. And I started trying to learn about how they did it. Like, how do you become more patient? It seems a lot more complicated than how do you start up a new company, honestly.
So how did you go about learning how they did it?
Well, it's a long process, and it's something that's still ongoing till today. I think it's a mindset of what's important to you, and if you value it, you will find the things that teach you how to do that.
Where you focus your energy.
Yeah, definitely.
You will find the opportunity to keep going towards.
Definitely. And when I started on that journey, I was still like, okay, now I reject business. Now I'm going to just try to become a better person.
Okay. So would you say this was the beginning of, I don't know if you like to call it this, but would you say it was the beginning of your spiritual journey?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yes, this was when sort of the center of gravity of my priorities sort of shifted and became much more internal.
Now, I see you as a spiritual teacher. Do you call yourself a spiritual teacher?
No, I think it's a way too big a title for me. But I really consider myself a student. I've always loved learning, and I think the best students make the best teachers. So if other people want to see me as a teacher, that's sort of up to them. I really am very focused. You know, I still have my own teacher, and I'm still very sort of committed to my practice as a student.
Yes, in fact, we've spoken about mentors before. You and I, like, we're super into mentors.
Definitely. But yeah, to sort of answer your question fully, I got to a point where I said, okay, now I'm learning how to become a better person, I'm changing my behaviors, but if I don't, there was a drive, I could say, to express that out into the world. You know, we can just sort of sit in a cave and meditate and be patient, or we can test our patience against the world, which is a lot harder.
And in a way, that seems like, I don't know, maybe you'll tell me otherwise, because you've experienced both. You've experienced the monastery meditation and the outside in the world. Sometimes I think that the outside in the world and sort of still staying centered and grounded and sort of in touch is the real spiritual journey, is the real spiritual growth. But maybe there's both.
Yes, I have a good friend of mine who is a yoga teacher, and he spent a lot of time in the Himalayas, which is famous for yogis going and living in caves and sort of releasing the world to try and find their spiritual awakening. And he tells some really funny stories about how these monks in the caves, like, they fight over caves and they have like the same dramas that we have.
They just take it there.
Yeah, they just take it, to the cave in the Himalayas. And I think that's just so funny. And that's not to say that there aren't people there who are obviously super wise and have attained something maybe extraordinary. But the point is that, it's not really about our environment. It's about how we choose to act in the face of our environment. And
it's about our internal environment.
Yeah. And those instincts to kind of go more into the selfish and the egoistical, narcissistic side of ourselves is always going to be there, no matter if you're in a cave, on a mountain,
arguing with your husband.
Yes, I mean
that's when I get in touch with my real narcissism.
There's nothing like a good argument to fire us up. Yeah, so I just said, okay, I've learned a little bit, but now I want to express this out into the world. And I've always been very passionate about business, and I then realized that there were other entrepreneurs out there who were bringing these two worlds together. Okay. They were bringing that, I guess we can call it spiritual devotion, and making their business a reflection of what they really were devoted to, and whether that's environmental sustainability, whether it's people care, whether it's whatever it may be. I think that really gave me hope, and I said, wow, if there are people who have built multi-million-dollar companies based on these values and have actually become a better person through doing it, then I felt like that's something that could really suit me. That was a way that I could do business and still enjoy without feeling I'm selling my soul.
I got goosebumps when you said that. So how did you start with Grassy Hopper? That was your first business, no?
Yeah, that was I actually started an NGO, so I already had this kind of startup mentality of kind of project creation. But Grassy happened very much not really through my own intention or control. When I was traveling in Peru, I had just become vegetarian. And when you travel and you're vegetarian, sort of the first thing you do when you get to a new city is look up the vegetarian places. And obviously in sort of more tropical environments, the amount of fruit and food and, you know, different varieties is really, really big.
Yeah.
And that was just a real highlight of my time traveling there. Like every time I'd get to a new cafe and try new fruits and new foods, and it felt so different from my preconceived notion of health, which was like low-fat yogurt and sugar-free and everything free. Like I always, growing up, I just couldn't relate to it. I was like, you know, you only live once, why you just like
with the comfort in it, like, and the enjoyment.
Yeah, so like what's the point, you know? I guess it's because I've never really struggled with my weight, and I always sort of viewed healthy eating as a way to lose weight.
Okay.
And when I was there, I came into a whole new world, which was healthy food as a reflection of love for yourself, a reflection for love for the planet as well, and actually a really fun and creative way to engage with your food. I think we eat on average, like 90% of our diets is like an average of 8 plants, eight plants and animals.
Okay.
And so like probably like wheat, soy, beef, chicken, etc. Right? So I just realized when I was traveling how beautiful healthy eating can be, and what hubs of inspiration these cafes were, because you had a lot of kind of bohemian people, travelers coming in from, you know, all different cultures, also musicians. So it was really a melting pot as well, where you could meet like-minded people.
So you wanted to bring that to Malta?
Definitely. When I came here, I was like, you know, need a place where you can go have a good veggie burger, meet interesting people.
That was exactly why I used to go for the veggie burger, like every single time. I don't think I ate many other things. Your burgers were the best.
Yeah. We still get I still get a lot of comments about the spicy chickpea burger. So yeah, I came back to Malta. I actually started working for someone else in one of the first vegetarian cafes in Malta.
Did you have any experience with catering?
Literally none.
So how that must have been like a huge learning experience, no? Because I've worked as a waitress, but I've never been in catering, and like what I've heard is it's tough, and you can lose a lot of money from like stock and stuff. So how was it for you? Like what steps did you need to take to figure it out, to get it started?
I think, to be honest, one of my weaknesses is that I just jump into things that I probably shouldn't be jumping into. And I very much did it out of, you know, passion and love. I had to learn a lot of painful and expensive lessons along the way.
Okay.
I did have a business background. My dad's an entrepreneur as well, so I always had that sort of business mentality. Mm-hmm. But catering is probably, you know, top 2 hardest businesses to run of any business. So yeah, it was extremely challenging. I went through a period of extreme stress from the financial pressure, and that really led me to starting Sanya, in all honesty, because I always felt like it's not just about the food. Like, food is a great way into health, but there's so many other things, and I was eating very healthy, but I was still stressed.
For sure.
So for sure. That really planted the seed then for me, saying like, okay, I want to take this journey a little bit deeper. So yeah, I started very randomly. I was working for somebody else, and I got offered to buy this kiosk randomly. You know, someone walked in one day and was like, oh, I'm selling this kiosk. It was in Brighton at the time, and she was like, do you want to buy it? And I was like, maybe I do.
So you started Grassy Hopper in Brighton first?
No, I imported the kiosk to Malta. So this kiosk was like selling bacon baps in Brighton.
I see. Okay, so a kiosk is like a sort of a mobile,
like a cabana kind of thing.
Okay.
It's
Yes,
like
I
a trailer.
heard that Grassy Hopper started this way, but I didn't know Grassy Hopper this way.
This was like the first couple of years of the business.
Okay.
And I was just, I mean, a whole journey in itself. You know, it's just so many experiences, adventures, lessons.
So then you started Sanya. How many years after you started Grassy?
I think it was around 4 years. 4 years into the Grassy.
And so you got in touch with the need for Sanya through your own sort of food is not enough. I'm stressed. Life is stressful. How am I going to manage this? Was that it?
I mean, I think it started a bit before the stress, because even before I got very stressed, I was very interested in health and spirituality in general. So when I was traveling, it wasn't just my interest in food that got awakened, but it was my interest in yoga and in spirituality in general. And when I was on that trip, this was just out of university, I had my first spiritual experience, and at that point the seed was planted.
When you say you had your first spiritual experience, would you like to tell us a bit about that? Or
I can. It's kind of a freaky thing to share, but I can for sure. So when I was in Peru, I was just, that sort of seeking drive came up. Like I was seeking, I wanted to know what's the meaning of life, what's the purpose of life, you know, what should I care about, how can I become a better person, how can I raise my level of consciousness, you can say. So I was very much just trying a lot of different things. I was trying yoga, I tried Reiki, I was just sort of whatever was
there a
in my
sense of
path.
urgency about it, or how was it?
Not urgency, more just like real curiosity. I was really, really curious.
Okay.
And that link came between sort of people like, you know, Saint Francis of Assisi, for example, who had a level of consciousness that was very, very high. That's why he could be so selfless and patient and compassionate. And so then the question became, so how do you get there? So I was very, very open to trying anything that would get me that experience. Except for one thing. There was one thing I didn't want to try, which is very famous in Peru, which is called Ayahuasca.
Yes.
Which is a psychoactive plant from the Amazon, which gives you a very deep sort of, you can call it a trip, I guess.
So you didn't want to do that?
I had met quite a few people who had the experience and found it really, really challenging. I met this one guy and he was like, whatever you do, don't do it. He put the fear of God into it. I was just like, oh God, this sounds horrible. I'm never going to do that.
Okay.
But I was considering doing something else, which is a different kind of plant. In Peru, they call them medicines. We call them drugs, but there it's a very much a fabric of their society, and they would have these experiences for physical healing. So if they had some physical disease like cancer or whatever, or if they had some mental issues, anxiety, etc., they would go to a shaman.
Okay.
And the shaman would give them this experience.
So it sounds as though their approach to illness or imbalance is that it's not just physical, it's the spiritual and the emotional as well. So you need to go through a process, sort of like a ritual, in order to heal.
Exactly. You need to sort of find yourself deeper, and that the healing process is intertwined with that.
Okay.
So I was sort of open to trying this cactus, which I had heard was like more gentle and more nice. You know, ayahuasca it's just like it sounded really terrifying.
You puke a lot, no, with ayahuasca?
Yes, you do. And anyway, I ended up on this ferry ride up the Amazon. It was a 5-day, very slow, painful journey up the Amazon. And on this ferry, I met this really interesting Belgian guy, and he was on his way. We were traveling to this city called Iquitos, which is the only city which you cannot get to by road in the world. You can only go by plane or by ferry.
Okay.
And after traveling in Peru for 6 or 7 months, I was very low on budget. I was doing everything the cheapest way. So I was like, a cargo boat up the Amazon, why not?
Okay.
So I ended up on this boat with a friend of mine who had literally just arrived in Peru, which was quite a baptism of fire for her. And anyway, we got to this city, and I didn't know that this city it's in the middle, it's like the heart of the Amazon jungle. So it's very famous for ayahuasca.
Okay.
I just wanted to go to the jungle, but when I was on this ferry, I met this guy who was specifically going there to do ayahuasca.
Okay.
And for some reason, this guy just got it into his head that I need to do this.
Okay.
And I was like, no, like this is not for me. He was also like quite an eccentric character as well. So even more, I was like, oh, this is really not for me.
Okay.
And I told him no, and he just carried on. And one day he knocked on my room in my hostel, and he just pulled me out of the room, and he he said, oh, my shaman is here, like you should come and speak to him. And I was just like, all right, like, whatever, like I'll go speak to this shaman. And anyways, ended up sitting down with this Peruvian shaman, and these shamans, they don't have any sort of need for you to do it, so they're just in themselves, they're very relaxed.
They're not trying to convince you.
No, not at all, he's just like, I think he was just kind of a bit bewildered by the fact that like I'm there but I don't want to do it, and he's supposed to like talk to me yet I don't want to do it, so it's like, I'm not going to persuade you, so like what's the point of this conversation? And anyway, I don't know how we got talking, but at one point I just told him, I'm scared to do this, like I don't want to do this because I'm scared. And he just looked at me and he goes, what are you scared of? And it's like his eyes just like pierced into my soul, and this question of like, what exactly are you scared of? And I literally couldn't find an answer. I was like, what am I scared? Like, am I scared of vomiting? I've vomited before. It's not, I don't think I'm going to die. And I just like kept sitting with this question of like, what am I scared of? And when I couldn't find the answer, I was like, well, then maybe I should just do it.
Okay.
And I just decided there and then to try it.
Okay.
And anyway, then sort of after he left, the panic set in. I was like, oh my god, what am I doing?
This was once you've taken it?
No, this was like after I've decided like I'm going to do this, and then he left and I'm like, oh my god. And I had, I think it was 2 or 3 days till this ceremony was planned, and I went into like full panic mode. At that time I used to smoke a lot of weed, so I was very addicted to weed, and in fact that was one of the things that was kind of tempting me, that this ayahuasca is very good for healing addictions.
Okay.
So I said, okay, since I'm going to do it, then I'm going to use this as my chance to stop smoking weed.
Okay.
And I had heard along all the horror stories that I had throughout my 6 months about ayahuasca, that ayahuasca doesn't like people who smoke weed. So if you have a history of smoking weed, the experience is going to be more aggressive. You're going to vomit more and...
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I was like, okay, I need to stop smoking. So I just went like cold turkey.
Okay.
They also recommend this detoxification diet because, again, like it's a detox.
The detoxification diet came before the experience, or
no, it's to prepare.
After, like to prepare.
Yeah, so before and after you need to kind of cleanse your body, because the ayahuasca in Peru they call it la purga. So it's the purge. And in fact, this is why you're vomiting your guts out, right? Because you're purging all of these toxins that have been stored up.
Okay.
So I was like eating just fruit only for 2 days, no salt, no sugar, which if you like overnight stop smoking weed, which you've been addicted to for quite a few years, stop like eating anything,
no sugar.
It's just like, it's quite challenging. So
and
just
fruit, that's difficult to throw up as well. No, like at least if you've eaten a burger, it feels good to puke that.
Yes, but obviously then you're just puking up the burger instead of puking up like sort
the
of
toxins,
the deeper levels of whatever's going on in there. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I ended up in this stone room, a room around this size, just stone, was like pure stone, and a bench all the way around made of stone.
Nothing comfy.
Nothing.
No pillows, no blankets,
nothing.
no where you walk.
They do give you a bucket as soon as you walk in. They're like,
great.
this is your bucket.
Whatever you need.
Welcome. This is going to be a nice ride.
You have water?
Nothing. Maybe I had some water. I can't remember if I had water, but I had a roll of tissues with me. Because again, horror stories, you're going to puke, you might have diarrhea, it's going to be horrible. So I had this like tissue roll.
Prepared.
And you do it at night.
Okay.
So it was like, I think around midnight at the time.
Why at night?
I think there's quite a few reasons. I think mainly because obviously you're going in to yourself. So there are some rituals that they do during the day, but that's more kind of like to connect outward with nature and so on.
Was there light in the room?
So this was the thing. So in the beginning there was light. They had candles, and we were just 2 foreigners in the room. The rest were all local Peruvians.
You and this guy who you met?
No, there was actually that guy, and there was also another guy who I had made friends with on the ferry, who said like I roped him in with me basically.
Okay.
So we were actually 3 of us. Basically they pass around this cup with this brew that you drink. And I tell this story just because it was very symbolic for me, and for some reason it always comes to my mind. But after you drink the brew, the shaman turns to his assistant and he goes apagar la vela, which means turn off the candles, and the substance is starting to take effect, so you're starting to kind of lose connection to reality.
So you sit in darkness then?
In pitch black. So all I had at this point like was this candle, which I was like staring at, trying to kind of keep a hold of reality, because you just feel like everything's just collapsing.
Oh god.
And then he said he's gonna blow it out, and I was just like, oh god,
Please
you know, like.
Oh
and he blew out the candle, and I just saw this like crack of light coming out from under the door. And I remember just like, you know, like looking at this light, like, oh god,
no, don't go.
And then you just have to surrender, because, I mean, fighting it is just, that's a horror show. Like you just have to surrender.
But your fear is gonna. I mean, that your fear pops up, it's gonna happen, you know.
Yes,
so it's like you're saying, the surrender. I have a note over there. When I think I've surrendered, I surrender more.
Yeah.
Like
Definitely.
so.
Well, this is possibly the biggest test of surrender.
So how did you surrender, and was it sort of a process where the fear would come back and then you'd have to surrender again, or was it like okay, now I've surrendered? Do you remember?
On that specific occasion, once the brew starts taking hold of you, you lose your control, your conscious control. So
okay,
at that point, you know, then the vomiting starts. You just, you know, I had like bucket, I was like head on the bucket, I was just like survival mode totally.
Okay.
So you don't really have any time to be scared. You're just kind of like, I mean, everyone has a different experience. I don't want to condition people with my experience, because other people have had completely different experiences. But maybe I had a lot of toxins in there, I don't know, but it was very, very challenging physically. I literally felt like I was just being ripped, like soul from body. It was extremely like being kind of on a boat and you're seasick, and it was just like really, really overwhelming.
You just want to like get out of there.
Yes, but then at a point you're so uncomfortable in your body that your only choice is to just let go and kind of like go into a bit more of a meditative state.
Because you can't escape it.
No, I mean it's your own sensation, you know. There's nowhere to go, there's nowhere to run away from it, and it's completely overwhelming.
Yeah. I have similar experiences with fibromyalgia. When it gets like really bad, it's just like, okay, where are you going? Like, you're gonna keep running from this, you're gonna keep fighting it.
It just makes it worse, right? Yeah.
Surrender.
Totally. So anyway, I sort of survived the first, you know, couple of hours are the most intense, where you're really, you know, in the shit. I was. But then as it starts kind of settling, you are a bit on a spiritual journey. You have a lot of visions, you're kind of going through, you know, different aspects of your life. A lot of realizations start sinking in. And what happened to me was that I just really felt God's presence for the first time in my life.
And how did you feel it? Like, what did it feel like?
Oh, it's probably the hardest thing in the world to describe. But an extraordinary amount of love and peace and just connection, you know, to something bigger than yourself, which is a bit of a cliche, but that's literally how you feel. You feel very connected to the whole universe. And I felt so overwhelmed with this joy of feeling this. Like, it was such a beautiful feeling. That I actually started crying, and I used my whole toilet paper roll that was supposed to be for the vomit and the diarrhea. I actually used it just like crying and blowing my nose. And
that must have been very healing to cry that much.
Yes, it was like a homecoming, you can say, between myself and my soul. Because before that I wanted to believe in something bigger than myself, but I always felt like if I believed, it wouldn't be because I've experienced, but because it's just safer and easier to believe that there's a purpose to this world. And I didn't want to believe that way. But when I had that experience, it was just so deep within me that
it became something that you weren't believing because you felt you had to believe in something. It was something that you experienced, and that switched on the belief.
Yes.
It was that sense of connection, like kind of that there's something much bigger that connects us all. Is that it?
Definitely. I mean, you have to experience to believe. If you believe without experiencing, then it's fundamentalism, and it's just, you know, it's not helpful to us to believe things we haven't experienced. Then obviously I had this question, like, can I experience this without the ayahuasca? Because you always have that doubt in your mind, like, was this just, induced by something else? Like, is this a feeling that I can get without the ayahuasca?
Yeah.
And therefore my spiritual curiosity and that seeker within me got even more amplified. And yeah, that's where it all started, really. And so many other things have happened since then.
Okay. So we started speaking about the ayahuasca experience from my question to you about how you started Sanya. So how did you end up then starting Sanya?
So, as I said, that fire was lit within me of, I want to feel this more. I want to feel happy and peaceful. Like, there's no better way to feel. And I started to seek these experiences, and I started to find many different things. And one of the things that I found was psychology and meditation. And I feel like these two are inseparable.
Yes.
Because meditation is that connection to our soul and connection to our spirit. And psychology is helping us to not get stuck in our ego and to know ourselves better. And it's like, you can know the universe without knowing yourself. And that has always struck me as extremely dysfunctional.
I remember you telling me this. That's like I remember you telling me a sort of meditation on its own isn't enough. There needs to be the self-awareness, the practice of self-awareness and growth.
Yeah, I mean, you can meet people who have meditated for 10 years and they have huge egos. And that always, like, I just couldn't understand that. It was always like, if you've meditated so much, surely your ego should be coming down. Like, that's the whole point of meditation.
But sometimes you need the reflection, like you need somebody sort of pointing it out, sort of like when your ego is sort of, because obviously a healthy dose of ego is good. Like we wouldn't have created our businesses without having a healthy dose of ego. At the same time, sometimes your ego can sabotage you.
Yeah, I mean, ego is a bit of too broad a term. We can see maybe the shadow more than the ego, right? Because there's positive ego and negative.
How do you understand ego?
I think the way I refer to it is probably closer to the shadow than the ego itself. But I see the ego as our individuality. And again, that can be used for good or it can be used for negative.
Yes.
Very often the way we refer to it is that individuality that expresses itself in a negative way.
Okay.
The individuality that puts itself before others.
Okay. Because in Gestalt therapy, we have the concept of the id, the ego, and the personality function. And the ego is what we are working with. Sort of the ego is the decision maker, the one who's saying, okay, the id, you go inwards, right? That's the sensation. Where am I right now? How do I feel? Memories, culture, everything. So the unconscious. And then the personality function is identity, like what's my role right now? And the ego, we call it ego strength, and it's the decision maker, like I said before, kind of, yes, please, more of that, no, thank you, none of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think on each level you have light and shadow. The id has light and shadow. So does the ego and so does the personality. And I think, what I'm talking about in this case is those shadows aspects of ourselves, whether they're subconscious or conscious. The path of meditation is to reduce your ego, to reduce that shadow, to reduce that sense that you are something bigger than the universe, right? That maybe you can call it narcissism.
Yeah, that sense that maybe we have more control than life has over us.
Yeah, it's like we want to be the boss of life, right? We want to be the boss of everyone, not just life, right? Like everyone, life itself and everyone in it.
I love to be the boss of life.
Careful what you wish for.
I know, no, I don't, but no, anyway, we're interviewing you.
So yeah, anyway, I went on this journey to figure out, okay, how can I feel more peaceful and more happy? And what I realized was that I need to, one, strengthen this feeling within myself that there's something bigger than myself. And to do that, I also need to work on my shadow. I need to work on all of those ways that I act that are shadowy. If I can use that very technical word.
Yes.
And that's why I love psychology and meditation together, because as we said, you can be a meditator who sort of feels, at one, and conceptually you understand that. But then you're very narcissistic in your personal relationships.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same way the other way around, right? You can sort of work on your psychology to make you more adequate into society, but then you can also still not be really happy because your sense of your life is just yourself as an individual. And I don't believe that you can be happy when you are like that.
Yeah.
I think happiness comes from connection.
Yes.
So we need both, and that's what I started experiencing and experimenting with and practicing, and I invested a lot of time and money and effort into my own spiritual experience and psychological experiences as well.
Yeah, we grow through investment.
Yes, and eventually I always had this wish, like, wow, I'd love to share these experiences with others.
Yeah.
And I was offered the space, and
it's similar to Grassy.
Yes, and I can honestly say that I never said, like, okay, I'm going to start a holistic center now, I'm going to open a spa. I never said that. But someone came and said, listen, do you want to open up a juice bar in this spa? And at the time, the spa didn't have anyone running it. And because I'm a bit stubborn when it comes to my values, and I didn't want to have a juice bar, a Grassy Hopper inside a spa, which was doing, using chemicals and unsustainable practices and Botox and God knows what else, right? It didn't fit with my values.
Yeah.
So I said, well, I'm either going to do all or none. Then I had a meltdown. I was like, whoa, I should do none. I already have a plate. But there was this very deep call within me that said, this is your purpose. It was a voice that I couldn't ignore. And I asked for this.
I said, I want. Again, like every time you get, sorry I interrupted you, but every time you get in touch with that sense of purpose and life brings it, I get tingles.
Yeah, we have that sensitivity, honestly, to energy, but we're so used to just using our mind for everything that we've lost that connection. We have this intuition, we can feel this kind of energy, and yes, like, I haven't given the full story because it's a very deep, intimate experience, but you felt that there was something significant in that. And to tell you the full story, I had actually been to Gozo for my birthday just a couple of weeks before I got offered the space. And I went to a lot of my favorite spiritual places in Gozo, and I was doing my meditation, and this was like a little mini pilgrimage. And in that moment, I had a very deep meditation, and I asked the divine, I said, I felt so much love in that moment. And again, coming back to kind of replicating that ayahuasca experience, after many years, you can replicate that connection. And I said, I feel so connected to this sense of something bigger than myself. I said, like, how can I serve? Because that's what you feel when you're connected. The next thought after feeling love is, how can I give?
Yes. Growth, then contribution.
Exactly. And I asked in my heart, I said, this is my country. I love Malta. I honestly have a lot of love for Malta. I said, how can I be of service? And I specifically said the words, no matter how hard it is, what you show me, I will do. And then
life brought you.
2 weeks later, it came, and I said, no, I'm too stressed. And then I sort of like remembered, like, hold on. Just 2 weeks ago you were sitting and saying no matter how hard, and now you're saying, oh, it's too hard. So I just said, well,
okay.
You have to stick to what you feel when you're at your most connected, not when you're at your most stressed. Like, that's the true authentic you.
Yes.
So I just committed, and I decided to really take a leap of faith and start again, go into a business which I had absolutely no experience of.
And this must have been another huge learning curve for you, no? I mean, what were some of the biggest challenges with developing Sanya?
To be honest, it's actually an easier business to run than catering. So I had a lot of the right background. I think I'm still learning how to market the business. I still have realizations, that I probably should have realized a lot longer ago, which I have now. I'm like, wow, I should have realized that 3 years ago. Because Sanya is something very new, and the message that we're bringing is that this is not a luxury.
Yes.
You know, we tend to think of a spa as a luxury good. You go to pamper yourself, and you know, we get so many people asking, like, do you serve prosecco so I can come and have my massage and then have prosecco? And we don't serve prosecco, and we don't because we're not a traditional spa in the sense of just come and pamper yourself.
Since I came to Sanya, I've never gone to another spa since. And like, it's just not the same.
Thank you. It's really nice to hear that.
And I was telling, yesterday I was taking a Bolt to Sanya, and I was telling the driver, like, he was like, I'm thinking about getting my girlfriend a present. And I was like, oh, what are you thinking of? He said, maybe a spa day. I was like, I'm going to a spa. Like, it's amazing.
Thank you. That's so sweet of you. And it's touching for me because I'm still on this mission to kind of explain what Sanya really is, because we call it a spa, but really it's so much more. And
it's a center for healing, I feel.
Yes, and it's a center for well-being. It's a place where you can come and learn how to go within and how to be well. And it's so much more than just the massage and prosecco, right? But again, we live in a world where that kind of depth and self-care in the relationship with yourself is quite rare.
Treated as an afterthought.
Yeah, I didn't grow up with anyone telling me any of this stuff. Like, I had to go to the other side of the world on numerous occasions to try and figure it out and find some sort of guidance.
I broke down in order to learn. We spoke about this on your podcast.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, you know, life brings you what you need to learn it, often in a very hard way. But this is what I always tell people, you know, the message comes, this is actually a phrase I'm going to borrow from one of my podcast guests, Nicole Gibson, and she said, you know, the message comes as a feather, then it comes as a slap, and then it comes as a truck. And it's up to us which one we're going to listen to. And unfortunately, with health and well-being, it's something very easy to put on the back burner and very easy to sacrifice. Oh, we're busy, let me sacrifice that yoga class. And this is a very deep educational campaign that we need to do to make people realize that your well-being is not a luxury. Your well-being is your best resource. It's your best asset. I mean, we talk about entrepreneur. How can you run your business when you're not well? It's extremely difficult. So
I wouldn't have been able to start a life I choose had I not healed from fibromyalgia significantly and the stroke that I had. And lately I'm going through another phase where I'm flaring up a lot. I'm experiencing pain on a daily basis. And I know that I need to do some redesigning because there needs to be more space. Like, I can't be running through my days. You know, like I have a beautiful problem. Like, my business has grown and it's doing really well. And so now I need to restructure the business in order to take care of my health, because as you're saying, like, when you are not full, the business reflects that, like, and the business will then suffer.
And you will suffer, you know, because first of all, entrepreneurs, we don't do very well when we're not working. Like, we like to have drive and we get satisfaction and fulfillment out of it, and that's fine, but it needs to be in balance, because when that gets out of control, our well-being suffers. And at the end of the day, you know, if you had asked me this 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't say it with such confidence, but I can say now with my full heart, like, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And if we don't prioritize, and when I say spiritual, I don't mean you need to be religious, I don't mean you need to start singing Kumbaya or wear malas or anything like that. What does it mean is just connecting with yourself and connecting to something bigger. Maybe that's nature, maybe that's Jesus, maybe that's Buddha. It's completely up to each individual. But there is a place inside of us that knows that this material reality is not the only thing in our lives. We get a lot of satisfaction from our inner experience of the world, our growth, our relationships. Even the same experience materially. For example, you could start a business for just a material goal, or you can start a business with also that self-development goal as well, and that growth and trying to become a better person. I would call that spiritual. So it doesn't mean that you have to not do things materially because you're a spiritual person. It just means that the way you use your material life is different. Sometimes the material life can be the boss and the one calling the shots. but ideally our spirit and our soul is calling the shots, and the material is the tool to help us just get more and more connected with ourselves.
How has your relationship with money evolved through your journey of entrepreneurship and spirituality?
I think entrepreneurship has really healed my relationship with money, and that's a really good thing, because I had a lot of shadows around money. I had a lot of rejection for money, I had a lot of judgments of money, I had a lot of guilt for being brought up in a family that had, enough money for me not to struggle. And so there was a lot of, weird subconscious beliefs there around money. And over the years, when you deal with your shadows, they all come up, mother issues, father issues, money issues, brother issues, whatever, right? Like every issue you comes to the surface. And I've made peace with money to a certain extent. Obviously, like, you never know what you're not at peace with, right? Because like the shadows in the dark, so there's some more shadows in there, right? And in fact, I always smile when my clients say like, "Oh, I healed that," right? Because from experience, it's an onion, right? And there's always deeper layers. So now I caught myself saying that the same thing, right? I healed my relationship with money.
Or you've healed more than you were before, kind of thing.
I've made some progress.
Yeah, like my relationship with I hate to call it fibromyalgia, but it's an easier way than saying constant physical pain. So
yeah, for sure. So I think I've come to realize that money is what you make of it. You can use money for good, you can use money for evil. And it's not just money that we can use. Power, sex, drugs, anything.
Yeah.
We blame money because it's easier than taking responsibility for our own shadows.
Yes.
So when we do, we realize that money is neutral. I want to have money because I want to do a lot of good projects that I feel are very, very meaningful for me.
Absolutely.
I've learned how to receive money, which, to be honest, was a big challenge for me. I would remember even clients giving me money in the beginning. It just felt so... I felt almost ashamed, to take that money. And I've had to really, really change my perspective of that. And this was something that my teacher really taught me, whether you're receiving 1,000 euros, 1,000,000 euros, or 1 cent, just receive it humbly like this. Not like I'm going to take it, but like I'm receiving it.
Yeah.
And
say thank you.
Yeah, receive it with gratitude and humility, because that is a gift.
Yeah.
And whether someone is paying you for a service or not, it is still a gift. If a client comes and pays for my service, that is a gift. They've trusted me, they've come to me, they've allowed me to give them a service, and then they're giving me money and I'm going to feel ashamed. It's it's kind of bizarre, to be honest, but I think it comes from a deep place where we don't feel like we're worthy to receive. And it's quite a challenge to unwind that, especially in a culture which thinks we need to work to receive. So I hope there's been quite a bit of progress, and we'll see what... I'll update you on the other shadows I discovered in a couple of years' time.
We'll do another podcast.
Shadow catch up. Like, what new ones surface their heads?
What's one of the major sort of challenges, failures, sort of one of the most challenging times? I doubt you would even classify it as a failure, but like something that really sort of rocked you in your journey with entrepreneurship?
I think, to be honest, the hardest things for me to cope with have been breakdowns in relationships. So in business, along the way, you're going to have pain that's created either through people letting you down, or you letting people down, or there's so many sort of different dynamics that can take place between human beings. And there were a couple of experiences that I had along my journey, probably more than a few, that caused me a lot of pain. And I think dealing with that pain and healing that pain whilst I'm still trying to, function and run my business was quite challenging. And also finding that resource within my soul to actually forgive, because it takes a certain strength and energy to be able to forgive, and it takes bit of humility and responsibility as well for your part in the matter. Yes. And I think that was what challenged me the most. But as always, there was a lot of gifts from that, because
you learned.
Yeah, it's a big healing process to let go of the pain people have caused you. And
what's one or two things that you've learned from these sort of upsets in relationships?
Only two. So, I could write a book on what you learn when you try to heal pain. That's
the two that come to you now.
So I think the first one that's coming to my mind is that we try to control life, and we try to control how other people act. And the reality is we have no control over how people act. And when we want that control, we get very attached to people acting a certain way. And I think that is very destructive, because the reality is that when you have an incident with a person, they have let you down, they've acted in a way which you're not comfortable with, and you either have the choice to say, no, I'm right, this person should act this way, or you can let go of the control and just say, this is what happened, maybe I feel pain from it. But when you just allow it to be, what you realize is that you create a lot of space for healing. And what I have realized personally is, from dropping that expectation, I actually found a lot more compassion for why people act the way they do. So I've had incidents with, a couple of friends, for example, who are still really good friends till this day. And I went through some rocky patches with them, and when I just got off my high horse, and stopped saying they shouldn't do this. Yeah. Let's assume that I was right, that they did something wrong. Me clinging on to that is helping absolutely no one. But me saying, you know what, I completely accept the situation, and it's okay. I still like that person, love that person. What you realize is you can then realize, you know what, actually that person, maybe he acted like that because he was really scared. Or because he was really tired, or because he felt jealous, or she, or whatever, right? So
how do you then sort of stay with the compassion and forgiveness and still honor the boundary, right? Sort of not allowing the hurt to repeat over and over.
Great question. I think, again, I'm going to take inspiration from what a guest, Nicole, who said something really beautiful on the podcast that I recorded with her. And she said that when we love ourselves, we're automatically loving another. So when there's no boundary in love, right? We try to put boundaries to protect ourselves. And that's because we want to avoid pain. But the truth is we cannot avoid pain. No matter how good our boundaries are, pain is going to find its way to get through. So I think a more healthy thing is to just really go into that forgiveness process. Because in my opinion, and again, I don't want to generalize, because there are some people who will abuse. And if you see that this person is abusing you, then take your distance from this person. Right? But I feel like more often than not, when we forgive people, we also allow them to step into being a better person. And this has been I think when we're really honest with people and we say, let's say somebody hurt me, I can say, oh, you shouldn't have done that, why did you do that, it's not good that you do that. But if you say, listen, I can understand why you did that, and it really hurt me that you did that, but I know that that's not you completely. Right?
I know you love me, and even with the love, it hurts.
Yes, and even in that moment, if your love failed because you were selfish or whatnot, usually that's the thing, right? People are selfish, and just see what's good for themselves. What I have found in my experience is that when you're very non-judgmental in your communication and you don't blame them, but you just say, I'm not saying you caused me pain. I'm saying I felt pain by that action. What I found is that usually gives people the space to say, oh, you know what, actually that action wasn't good. I'm really sorry I did that. I'm sorry I hurt you. And, these two people in my life who I'm thinking of right now, I've become deeper and closer with them. It's created a deeper bond. And I think...
I mean, it sounds like these people were able to sort of own responsibility as well. Not in the sense of then they became the victim, sort of, oh, I'm such a bad person. Nothing at all like that, but in the sense of, I see what I did.
Yes, totally.
I see how I hurt you.
Totally. I mean...
And that's a big part of it as well, the growing in a relationship.
I mean, it definitely makes it a lot easier, obviously, if the other person takes ownership for their side and you take ownership of your side, then it's happy ever after, right?
You can keep growing.
But I have had instances with people who never took responsibility, and I think that was probably one of the hardest ones for me.
Yes.
When the other person doesn't, what do you do?
Yes.
But I still managed to find my peace with that. Didn't come like this. It took some time.
Yeah,
right?
And it can trigger you again and
yes,
again.
and I took a bit of space from that person for a while, and I might get re-triggered by this person if a similar dynamic comes up. But what I did do was I managed to accept that person for who they are and not take it personally as an insult on myself, because this is what we usually do, like, oh, people treat me bad because I'm bad. People don't treat me with love because I'm not worthy of love. And when
they don't see me as worthy.
Yeah,
like
they don't
make
see
a story
me, they don't
out
love
of
me,
it.
they don't respect me.
And in reality, what I'm hearing you say is you choose to leave the behavior with them, like kind of you leave it with them with love. This wasn't about me.
Yeah. And I think that creates a lot of ease around the relationship. Like, oh, that person's just, that's how they're choosing to be in this world. Like, that's their value set, that's their choices.
Yeah.
That has no reflection on my worth as a human being.
Yeah. And I don't have to bend over backwards to please them. I don't have to go along with it. Like, and if you need to take space, you take your space.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question, because this idea of healthy boundaries, I think, is really good, but it's also got its own shadow. And I think as a culture, and especially women nowadays, we're kind of so fed up of being oppressed and dominated that now we're just kind of like, screw everyone, like, I just do what I want, kind of thing.
Yes.
And while I can totally understand that as a sort of reaction to just having enough of being oppressed, and maybe it's a stepping stone, right? Like, maybe we need a bit of that energy to sort of extricate ourselves from people and places who are genuinely trying to abuse us.
Yeah.
But ideally, long term, that should not be the final destination. The final destination should be peace with oneself and peace with everybody else. And that will create a lot more harmony in our lives, I feel.
Yes, and the continuous returning to it, like, because we fall off balance and we step back into fear, and then you see yourself, oh, I'm in fear again. Like when I go into that narcissistic space, when Pete and I have an argument, for example, that's a fear response, and I can see it's a fear response, and the narcissism is like, oh, well, I don't need you. Like, kind of, and it's total BS. Like, I love him, and my biggest fear is losing him.
Yeah.
So kind of it's the sort of noticing, I've gone into fear again, like, and my defenses are up. Let me come back to love.
Yeah. And I think we just need to be very playful with that. Like, it's okay. Sometimes we're just so, oh, I'm in fear now. Oh God, now I'm in my ego. Like, we don't.
I've lost control.
Now I'm in my shadow. It's fine. We're a human being. We're going to be in our shadow.
Yeah.
And it's okay to feel all of the negative emotions that come with being a human. Sometimes when we start on this healing journey and we're like, okay, now I'm aiming to be patient, I'm aiming to be compassionate, and then suddenly we really reject the shadow because we're like, oh, this isn't the person I want to be. I don't want to be jealous, for example.
Well, that's the thing about the shadow, right? I think a lot of people assume that sort of, until if they've had no guidance with working with the shadow, there's a lot of, no, I'm not that way, or I never do this, or I've never felt that. I would never. There's a lot of this, right?
Yes.
And so the idea of the shadow is like, push it away.
Yes.
And in reality, it's sort of bringing love. Like, one of my favorite books and shows on, I know you have a thing with Netflix, but one of my favorite shows on Netflix is You.
Okay.
I don't think you've watched it.
No.
But it is about a character named Joe Goldberg, and he does horrible things to people, but he's convinced it's because of love. And one of the reasons that I love this show so much is because he's so complex, and because I think we can all see parts of ourselves in him, that possessiveness, that fear, the rage, the anger, like it's within us all. It's just about kind of, can I stay with that and acknowledge that within me, and sometimes it's really tough to.
Yeah, it's not fun. But we have to, like, I believe in this so much. I really do. In fact, I was thinking about it all week, like, this is what I do on the retreat mainly, is like create this space that we can become more honest with ourselves and really see our light and our shadow. Because to be honest, sometimes we struggle to see the light as much as we struggle to see the shadow. But any aspect of ourselves that we don't want to see is a problem. And it's a problem because it's blocking our vital energy. Our vital energy is a whole, it's a circle. If you're cutting a slice out and kicking it to the side, then that vital energy is there.
Yes, and that's going to be running your engine more than the rest of the pie. Like,
yeah, definitely. So
just containing it.
Yes.
Yes.
And this is why I say we need to be playful about it. We don't need to be like, oh God, the shadow, it's so scary and terrible. Like, we have this shame, like we're ashamed to feel jealous. We're ashamed to feel fear. I love that you just said what your biggest fear is, right out, it's like, this is how we need to be, like, it's okay.
It's one of my biggest fears. I have other big fears.
But you know what, it's just like, let's be okay with it. It's like, we're all human. Who doesn't have a fear of approval? Like, show me one person on this planet who doesn't have a need for approval, right?
Yes.
Fear of losing approval from people. We all have it, yet we're all kind of walking around pretending that we don't.
Yeah.
And entrepreneurs more than anyone. So it's about, listen, how can we look inside and make a relationship with the whole of ourselves, not just the parts that we like or the parts that we're used to.
Yeah.
So because, as I said, the light is there, and when we do our retreats, we do a lot of light and shadow work, and I see that there's usually at least half the group who find it harder to see the light than the shadow.
Absolutely.
So that's something we need to work on as well. And going back to entrepreneurship, because I feel like I'm diverting you very much away from the entrepreneur thing, but
no, I like where we went.
I just want to say that your business can be a tool to show you this as well. Your relationship is a great tool. Relationship, not just romantic relationship, but like with parents, it's a great tool. Our relationship with money, our relationship with our business, it brings in the personality, the ego, and the id. So if you have that awareness to question why things make you feel in a certain way, then you can really liberate yourself from these traps of the places where you don't want to see.
Absolutely.
So the business is a spiritual practice in itself, you can say.
So since you brought us back to business, Grassy Hopper you sold. Now your businesses are Sanya and Theobroma.
Yeah.
Just for people who don't know, I mean, maybe I can describe Sanya. Is that okay? Like, 'cause
please.
I'm
you do a really good job.
I'm completely in love with Sanya, and like the way that, rather than describe it, I just want to say like what my experience of Sanya is like, and like I go there for healing, like to like be with my body and receive some love and care from your therapists. I always take a journal, and I love to like just sit and like have a cup of tea and some Theobroma chocolates and do some journaling, and it's like that space where like I can be with me away from home, because I can be with me at home, but sometimes it's nice to be away. There's just less distractions, and that's how it is for me, and it's one of my favorite places. And Theobroma, like there's nothing more heavenly like to eat and taste, especially when you're gluten intolerant or you want to avoid refined sugar and dairy. It's just incredible.
Thank you. I mean, they're my labors of love, so I have a lot of love for both those brands. And it as I said before, it touches me when people really get the essence of what we're doing, because it is something a bit different, and I feel like I really want to respond to the current healthcare crisis that we have, because the something that drives me very much is the amount of suicides that we have globally. More suicides annually than people die in crime, war and terrorism put together. For me, it's heartbreaking. How can we as a society, how can we live with that, right? Like, we really need to offer support to people who are going through mental health issues. And for me, the spiritual crisis is a very big part of that. So
of course,
even though Sanya is not just about spirituality, so I don't want people to feel like, oh, I have to be spiritual to go to Sanya. It's not about that. It's just about, do you want to come to yourself in a deeper way? That is probably going to lead you to spirituality down the line, but maybe not, and that's totally okay.
And it's not always comfortable. Like you said, it's not like going to a spa and like feeling pampered. Like, sometimes I go and sort of I get in touch with a block, within my body, and it's painful, and the therapist helps me to work through it. And it's not like I leave sort of like it's gone completely, but I'm a step sort of it's a bit like in therapy, you gain more and more awareness the more often you do it. And this is why it's not, self-care is not a one-off practice. It's about having that momentum, that consistency. Like, you wouldn't send your kid to school one day a month.
Yeah,
like, you send them,
yeah,
5 days a week. I'm not saying we go to Sanya 5 days a week, but like at least twice a month kind of thing. There's that ritual.
Yeah, as I said, we need to kind of change this mentality from well-being as a luxury for it to being a crucial part of our weekly plan. So yeah, for some people it's going to be coming for treatments twice a month. For some people it's yoga twice a week. For other people it's coming to swim in the pool every day because they have really bad body pain. There's no kind of set thing, but where you need to start from is, what does my physical, mental and emotional well-being need? What do I need to give it for me to feel happy and healthy in my body? Mm-hmm. And the answer to that question is different for every single person, but there are a few different things you can try, right? Like, there's a pool of maybe 20 different techniques and things you can use to get there. Mm-hmm. And nowadays, because we have so much stress, we need to learn how to manage that stress, because not to go on about the Netflix again, but we've lost our ability to relax. We don't know how to relax.
Yeah.
Physically, we think we know what relaxation is, but most of those relaxation tools are still stimulating our nervous system, not just the Netflix.
In fact, I'm smiling because I was having this conversation with one of your therapists, and I'm not going to say his name because I don't want him, I want to still get appointments with him, but because he's so good. Yeah, I'm being cheeky. But we were speaking about relaxation, and I was asking him, like, how do you relax? Like, what is relaxation to you?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Very often we think relaxation is just stopping doing the things that stress us. So replacing those things with something else. So work stresses us out, so then we go for post-work drinks, and that's relaxing.
Yeah.
And mentally it probably is, right? Change of scene, change of environment. But if you look at the physical body, is the physical body restoring, not just relaxing? There's relaxing that restores us, and there's relaxing which is more of a distraction from the pain and burden of whatever.
And you're actually putting a load on the liver.
Yes, a load on the liver, not just the liver, but the nervous system is very delicate. And all of the most common health problems we have, high blood pressure, high sugar level, those are a sign that your parasympathetic nervous system is not getting enough time to restore. So this is why we need to learn the skill of how to restore our body, because
I mean, especially with the pandemic going around, I mean, kind of obviously it's a bit sort of a lot of people have very strong sort of notions about the pandemic, and there's a lot of confusion, and I don't want to speak about it as though I have it all figured out, because I don't. But what, from my experience of being unwell, and from having had the stroke and stuff, and the stroke happened in a real freakish way. Like, these two arteries got like rips in them, and they swelled up, and like my body healed from that. And so what I've come to know is that our bodies know how to heal. We just need to be able to get into that rest and digest mode. And my feeling is that it's the same with the coronavirus. I haven't had it, so I can't say, and even if I did have it, I can't say that my experience is the same for everyone. But belief plays a massive impact on illness, and if you don't know how to get into rest and digest, you're going to have a really hard time healing and recovering. And if you're feeding your mind with fear by going online all the time and seeing who died today, no, how many, and if you contract it, you're going to have an even harder time healing from it, because you're in fight or flight, and when the body's in fight or flight, the body cannot regenerate.
Yes, completely, 100%. We really need to learn how to manage the nervous system, and you cannot manage that without managing the mind. And our issue nowadays is we are so neurotic in our mind, right? The mind is on overdrive most of the time. It's addicted to stress, it's addicted to scrolling, it's addicted to consuming information. And
consuming in general.
Yes, consuming in general, but particularly information in this smartphone age. You sit down to have a meal, your mind wants to scroll instead of just like looking around, feeling yourself. In every moment we're fitting in the screen. And
losing ourselves.
Yes, when you do that, what you're doing is you're staying in the mind. Because when we look at the screen, we're in the mind.
Yes. Completely cognitive.
Yes, and this is why it can be so addictive, because especially if the body doesn't feel good, which throughout the day, there's going to be a period of the day where your body doesn't feel how you want it to feel. Whether it's post-lunch, you're feeling a bit lethargic or whatever, maybe you wake up, you're not as energetic as you want. The day, there's going to be a moment where you wish your body was different to how it is. And the best way to distract yourself from that is to scroll.
Yeah, or pop some pills.
Yeah, pop some pills. But this is another pill.
You're right. And that's the easiest, most accessible one.
Yeah, and it's the one, the pills we can all say, it's so visible, we know the cause and effect of that. But the scrolling, we don't really realize. And to go back to your point of the power of the mind, healing is a lot easier than we think it is, and it's a lot easier than we make it, because we have this disconnect. The body, I don't want to sound flippant, because it's really horrible to be in pain and to have disease. It's very, very extremely frustrating.
Yeah, and there are obviously different extremes of disease.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say, you just heal with your mind. It's very hard.
And it's a process.
But we do need to just realize that the mind plays a big role.
And how?
And we need to get out of our own way, because we're making it worse and we're making it harder to heal, because our mind is so extremely neurotic. And the only way to deal with this of the mind is to, one, restore the physical body, learn to manage the mind from a healthy way, and in my opinion, get more connected to nature. Spirit, nature, we can put them in the same bracket.
And I think that a lot of people might have resistances, because they think it's a lot of money to invest in your mind and invest in your body. It's true. But being sick is a hell of a lot of money too, And I remember when I had the stroke, I remember telling to Peter, I'm telling him the insurance didn't cover that much, kind of they were okay, you're done, really quick, so I much prefer investing in my health now, and by far, I'm not perfect at doing this. I go off balance, just I need to restructure now because I've gone off balance. But I just find it's important. We need to invest in the, not even prevention, in the well-being.
For sure. I mean, like with anything, if you don't have skin in the game, you're not going to take it seriously. How many times have you been given a free online course, and how many times have you actually completed that free online course?
Exactly.
If when you've done a course that costs thousands, you're going to bloody finish it.
Yes.
It's exactly the same with our health. This is why when people get sick, they become very invested, because they have skin in the game. They know that there's something riding on that.
There's something to lose.
And this is a bit our problem nowadays, that because if you're not sick, you don't realize how much you're losing out from not being at your best. and mentally and physically and emotionally.
Absolutely.
So it's very easy to put it on the back burner and feel like there's no price to pay. But the reality, and this is, a collective understanding that we need to shift, is that actually the opportunity cost of not looking after your well-being is huge. And yes, you need to invest. I wouldn't say money, right? Because there are a lot of things you can do for free, right? You can learn how to meditate for free on YouTube. Not that I would necessarily recommend that, but you don't have to pay for your well-being. You don't have to come to Sanya to get well. But what you do have to do is invest your time and your effort. And that's a hell of a lot harder to invest than money, to be honest. Investing money is good because then when you pay, we have to actually do it or stick to it.
Yeah, but I think also sometimes when you choose your teachers, kind of thing, like don't just sort of settle for anybody. Like you're saying, it's not necessarily the best thing to just stumble across someone on YouTube.
No, for sure. I mean, my point is like, 'cause, I get this question like, oh, you need money to do these things, and the reality is you don't. You need effort and time. Those you do need. If you have money, it helps because you can go on courses, you can get help from experts, you can sort of speed up the process, right? By getting support, like with anything. If you're in a business and you're going to pay for a consultant, it's going to speed up your progress. It's exactly the same with our well-being.
Exactly.
But I don't want people to feel like they have to, because it's so important that we literally, as a society, I don't think we can afford for people to feel like this is a luxury. This is a necessity. If you don't have the money to invest in it, then find free, commit to 40 days, starting your day by going outside and taking 10 deep breaths of fresh air and writing 3 things you're grateful for.
Yeah.
It's completely free. To do that for 40 days, you're going to have to sacrifice your time and your effort.
Yeah.
That's where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I think we can end the podcast here. You and I know can talk. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I really loved it.
Yeah, thank you. It's really nice to speak about life from the inside out, and especially things like business, which people maybe not really associate with, wellness and personal growth and self-development. It's nice to connect those dots and make people realize you can have both. You can be an entrepreneur and also be growing and learning, and from my experience, that just makes you a better entrepreneur.
Agreed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope that you enjoyed this as much as we did. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, or if you would like to subscribe, and please share this podcast with anyone you think might benefit from, and we'll see you in the next one. Lots of love.